Yes, thanks, Mike. I'll just say I'm glad to be here representing public services because Unison's got a membership of 1.3 million, but we also deal daily with 40,000 employers. And they're not large hospital trusts or local government authorities. We have a lot of small or business organisations, charities. We have 3,000 social care workers, and most of them are working for small private care companies. We also have 60,000 members delivering in the community voluntary sector. And for us, Brexit has been all about the fact that we've had austerity, we are literally hanging by a thread in our voluntary community sector. But also, I'd just like to say that Unison has been on a journey from, we came out, consulted our members right at the beginning in April 2016 when David Cameron announced that referendum, and 67% of our members, after an in-depth consultation, said we want to remain, and that's what we campaigned for. Then we had 4 priorities, which was basically, we'll accept the referendum. What we want though is a deal that's good for the economy, so that public services can be funded properly. We want to keep all our rights, workers' rights, equality rights, human rights, health and safety rights, environmental standard rights, etc. We want to make sure that migration is going to be put in a sensible way, that we keep EU citizens here because we need them in our health and social care services, but also any new migration system is going to be fair and just, but also meets, again, demand in our health and social care services. And last but not least, we understood, because we'd already led the kind of campaign against TTIP and CETA in the European Parliament, we understand what trade deals mean, and we know that Europe was the best trade deal for public services and for workers. A US trade deal wouldn't be no good, and we understand there are all sorts of different types of trade deals. What we also understand, though, is that our members do not understand that narrative. What they understand, though, is that we can best represent their rights in Europe, and that is the simplest and easiest way for us to take them on a journey to where we are. So, over time, we said, right, we'll have a look at Theresa May's deal, but we rejected it. Not the Good Friday, not the backstop, because that does protect the Good Friday Agreement. Our rejection was based on the fact that our General Secretary went to 10 Downing Street, along with Unite and along with the GMB, the 3 largest trade unions, and we said, right, if you want us to back your deal as a compromise, we would like to see in the treaty, not in an appendix, which can be overturned, but in the treaty, enshrined all our rights. We want a non-regression clause, so that no parliament in future can ever row back on what we've got now. We want a dynamic alignment clause, so that whenever rights and standards are, go through the legislation in the Commission, we get them automatically updated, upgraded in the UK. And also we want a social partnership model. Because the EU has a social partnership model, and our workers, our lawyers can go to the ECJ and say, I'm sorry, but I think the law's been broken here. All our voice for our 1.3 million members has been removed. So we said to Theresa May, where is your social partnership model? We know for a fact that the DIT have been setting up these trade boards, specialists, one on digitalisation, one on different sectors. No trade union has been invited, no civil society has been invited, no consumer rights groups have been invited. There is no voice at all for civil society in anything that they're replacing when we leave Europe. And we said that to Theresa May. She wasn't interested because she could not deliver social partnership as part of her model. So we came back to our NEC and said, this is not going to be good, because without a social partnership model, in any Brexit deal, we'll have no voice, and we cannot trust, and at that time, it was not looking like Theresa May obviously would get her deal through. We cannot trust Boris Johnson, ERG, to even look after our rights. We've got 13 rights protected at the moment in Europe. And one of them is two-pay, which is whether you're private or public delivering services, employers must basically transfer the same protection and payment rights. That will go without a doubt if that is not protected, okay? Employers actually support that right, okay, because they're not interested in trying to rip up and renegotiate terms and conditions all the time. They very much have been wedded to that social partnership model alongside lots of other partnership models. So for us, Theresa May's deal, we didn't back it. Now our position is we're not backing a no deal because obviously it will wreck public services. It's going to basically, Unison is also unique. We have 30,000 members in Northern Ireland, and for us, they have spent 40 years building a peace process. Our regional secretary and our officers work cross-party political to keep peace in the, so that there used to be discrimination in public services around different sort of, kind of partisan lines. We have worked to remove all that. And if that's not protected through the Good Friday Agreement and human rights aren't enshrined, and believe me, this government has got no inkling of protecting any or maintaining any of our human rights because they excluded one thing from the EU withdrawal bill in 2018, and that was the EU fundamental rights. When they transposed everything over, when we were going to transition, there was one thing they refused, and that was our fundamental rights. It told us straight away, and also in their Tory manifesto, they said, once we've dealt with Brexit, we're going to come back and get rid of human rights. So it was just shelled, okay? And of course, we haven't had a general election. We've had two. We've had Theresa May and we've had Boris Johnson, but we haven't had a general election. And if they win, they will remove all those rights. And if they win, for us, a no-deal threat is going to continue until we get Brexit over. Because even if there's a general election and Boris wins, he still may not have the numbers for a deal. So he could just say, actually, I did get an extension to the 31st of January, but I've got a mandate now to leave without a no deal. So that's a real threat hanging over us. And the thing about public services is it does keep the local economy going. In the North East, something like 1 in 3 people are employed by the public sector in one form or another. You have also the supply chain going on with all the local businesses and the multiplier effect. They are key to some of our regional economies. So we cannot allow our regional economies to collapse if there's lack of funding for public services. And I'll just end on something else. For us, there's 2 fundamental trade deals in the world that we could possibly join. One is a US model and one is a European model. And we already know what a US model is like because Europe in the end decided to walk away from TTIP because simply their standards are lower. Their regulation rights are lower. So we've got a really good argument to say to the public in a people's vote, listen, you've now got 2 choices. Stay with the higher standards because this government is quite clearly going to go with the lower standards. And I think it could be a lot easier to put that as a simple issue to the public because I think they now understand a lot more than they did about 3.5 years ago that Europe was a trade deal. It just allowed fundamentally a lot more things to move freely than any other trade deal in the world. But it also has an acquis of rights. Last but not least, Unison has 80,000 EU citizens and we've worked very closely with 3 million. We've worked with the Cavendish Coalition, which is all the employers who provide health and social care. We have told the Home Office continuously that if you don't get the settled status right, and what was all this happening about if we have a no deal, we're going to end freedom of movement immediately? In Scotland, they have lost 45,000 European citizens in the last year, I was told, by Edinburgh Council. And there's going to be a drop. We've got already 50,000 nurse shortages. We did some research with IPPR and they said we've got a shortage of 400,000 care workers. We need migrants, we need EU citizens and we need non-EU citizens in those services or else they will collapse. We said to the Home Office, can you exempt low-skilled workers in your new points? They've gone into consultation. They want to bring in an Australian-type points migration system if we Brexit. They said, basically, £35,000 will be the threshold where you'll be invited in. A care worker on average earns £14,000 a year. So we have said to them, can you not exempt that group? Because we are definitely going to need them. And they kind of like looked very sheepish and said, it's a political question, it's not a civil service question. So we're doing a lot of work behind the scenes to make sure that if there is Brexit, they get the migration new system up and running that doesn't frighten off EU citizens, because also they want to remove their, one of the bills that will now come back is the EU Social Security Bill, where they want to remove their rights to access social benefits. If you're on £14,000 a year, you need a top of universal credit or family tax credits to stay in the country. Last but not least, going back to Ireland, we've got frontier workers who live in the Republic and work in Northern Ireland, and they're not allowed to apply for settled status because they're actually in Europe still under the Republic. We're asking the government, what happens if we have a no deal to these workers because they're not allowed to apply for settled status? The same happens here in the UK. The government, we keep on saying to them, should Irish citizens here rely on the common travel agreement rights system, or should they apply for settled status? Because they are both sets of rights for Irish people. They can't tell us and they won't advise us. But we've asked them therefore to give us a little grid so we can tick what rights they've got, and then we can see quite clearly and give that to our Irish members working here in the UK, and also advise Irish citizens who are moving, who live in Northern Ireland. We've had no reply. So there's a whole set of rights missing right now, and that does affect workers and how they then think about where they want to work. So I'll leave that there, thank you.
Great.